You know, there's a kind of silence that only comes after betrayal, the kind that makes your chest feel empty, like someone just pulled the floor out from under you. That's what I felt when my parents looked me straight in the eye and said, "We're cutting you out of the will." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just smiled. Because little did they know, I was the executor. You ever had someone underestimate you so badly that it almost felt insulting to correct them? That's where my story begins. A quiet storm I never planned, but one that couldn't be stopped once it started. And before I tell you how everything unraveled, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Because by the end, you'll see this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about justice. Families always look perfect from the outside, don't they? Smiling pictures, Sunday dinners, fake laughter over roast chicken. But behind those closed doors, whispers, jealousy, promises that rot over time. And in my family, everything began to decay the moment money entered the conversation. I used to believe love could survive anything. Distance, pride, even greed. But when your own parents decide you're not worthy of their legacy, something inside you changes. You stop believing in family, and you start believing in consequences. That's when I realized I wasn't the victim they thought I was. Because the truth is, they didn't just cut me out of the will. They cut themselves out of mercy. And when the day came to read that will, I was the one holding the pen. I grew up in a house that looked like it came straight out of a picture frame. Big smiles, Sunday barbecues, and the smell of my mother's perfume lingering in every room. But the truth? It was all performance. My parents weren't cruel, not in the loud shouting kind of way. No, their cruelty was quiet, calculated. It came through in comparisons, in little jabs that felt harmless until you realized they were carving away pieces of you. My father was a man of rules, the kind who believed emotions were a weakness, and success was the only measure of love. My mother. She was the mirror of his ambition, polished and sharp, always reminding us who the real heir was. My brother Daniel wore that title proudly, the golden boy who could do no wrong. He got the praise, the car, the corner office. I got the responsibility, the one who handled the paperwork, the one who made sure things ran smoothly, the invisible glue holding the family together. Funny thing about being invisible, people start talking like you're not even there. I learned a lot that way. I learned how my father really felt about me. He's dependable, he'd say, but he doesn't have vision. I learned that my mother thought I was too soft, too patient. He doesn't fight back, she told a friend once. She was wrong about that. Still, I stayed close. I ran their errands, managed their accounts, even handled their estate paperwork when they didn't want to deal with the lawyers. That's how it happened. How I became the executor of their will. They signed the papers, trusted me to keep their affairs clean, and never thought twice about what that title actually meant. Sometimes I wonder if they thought I was too naive to understand the power they'd just handed me. Or maybe they believed I'd never use it. Maybe they were right, until that night. But before we get there, you should know something. Love makes fools of all of us. I didn't stay because I wanted their money. I stayed because I still wanted their approval. Even after all the insults, the silence, the years of being the second choice. Pathetic, right? Yeah, I thought so too. Still, I remember the last family dinner before everything fell apart. My mother sat at the head of the table, smiling that perfect smile she wore when guests were around. My father talked about retirement, about how the family legacy would live on. Daniel smirked at me from across the table like he already knew the ending of a play I hadn't read yet. And I sat there, listening, smiling, playing my part. The responsible one, the quiet one, the one they thought would never turn against them. Little did they know, the story they'd written for me was about to be rewritten in ink they couldn't erase. It happened on a Tuesday evening, one of those quiet, ordinary days that never warns you it's about to ruin your life. My father called and said, "We need to talk. Come by tonight." No warmth in his tone, no hint of what was coming. Just that sharp, familiar authority I'd grown up obeying. When I walked into the house, everything felt staged. The lights were dim, the air heavy with that same perfume my mother always wore when she wanted control of the room. Daniel was already there, leaning back on the sofa, smirking like he knew something I didn't. My mother sat beside my father, her hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes fixed on me like she was about to deliver a lecture. Not a conversation. My father cleared his throat and said it straight. No preamble, no build-up. We're cutting you out of the will. Just like that. I didn't even breathe for a few seconds. The words hung in the air, thick and slow. I think they expected me to shout or break down or beg, but I didn't. I just looked at them, both of them, and asked, "Why?" My mother smiled, the kind of smile that says we rehearsed this. "It's not personal," she said. "Daniel has proven himself. He'll carry the family name forward. You'll be taken care of in other ways. That's what she said. Like I was some stranger getting a polite severance check. Inside, my heart was burning, but on the outside, I stayed calm. Years of practice. "I see," I said, "if that's what you think is best." My father gave a small nod, like a judge delivering a final sentence. Daniel tried to hide his grin, but couldn't resist. "Don't take it personally, man," he said, patting my shoulder. "It's just business. Business." That was the moment something inside me shifted. I excused myself before they could say another word, walked out into the cold air, and let out a laugh, a quiet, broken kind of laugh. Because the truth hit me all at once. They had no idea what they'd done. You see, in their arrogance, they forgot one small but crucial detail. A few years back, when I was managing their estate paperwork, they made me the executor of their will. That meant I had control over how their wishes would be carried out, and what documents were legally binding. They'd signed it, sealed it, and trusted me to keep things in order, and I had. I didn't plan revenge that night. I didn't need to. All I had to do was wait, because the moment they chose greed over family, they handed me all the power they thought they'd taken away. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. What had changed? Why now? Why cut me out after everything I'd done for them? So, I started looking. Quietly. Casually. I went through old files, tax documents, even property papers I'd helped draft years ago. And what I found, let's just say it made everything clear. But that's a story for the next part. When the calm ends, and the real storm begins. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there in the dark, replaying every word, every smug smile, every cold look my parents had given me. I should have been angry, but anger would have given them too much power. No, I felt something quieter, sharper, a strange kind of peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop expecting love from people who've made it clear you'll never get it. The next morning I called my father. My voice was calm, almost cheerful. "I understand your decision," I said. "You raised Daniel to lead. I respect that." There was silence on the other end, like he wasn't expecting me to accept it so easily. Then he said, "I'm glad you're being mature about this." Mature. That word stung more than I thought it would. From that day, I played my part perfectly. I visited less. I smiled more. I asked about Daniel's plans for the company, about their new family trust. They were relaxed around me again, like the tension had lifted. My mother even started calling me for small favors, the kind she didn't trust anyone else with. I did them all, without complaint. Every document, every signature, every phone call, I kept copies. Quietly, meticulously. Sometimes I'd catch Daniel throwing me that same smirk, the one that said he'd won, and I'd smile back. That was our game now. He thought I was defeated. I let him believe it, because there's nothing more dangerous than the person everyone thinks has nothing left to lose. I started noticing things too. Small things they thought I wouldn't. New cars, new accounts, money moving around quietly between names. Daniel visiting lawyers without telling anyone. It didn't take long to realize what was happening. This wasn't just about the will. It was about control. They weren't cutting me out for business reasons. They were rewriting everything, erasing me completely from the family's legacy. At dinner one night, my father raised a glass and said, "To new beginnings." My mother smiled. Daniel winked. I raised my glass too, steady, polite, unreadable. "To endings," I said softly. They laughed. They thought it was a joke. I remember walking out of that dinner thinking how strange it was that peace and revenge can feel so similar when you finally stop caring about approval. I wasn't planning to destroy them. Not yet. I just wanted to see how far they'd go. And as it turned out, they were willing to go much further than I imagined. You see, betrayal is never the end of a story. It's just the calm before something far darker. It started with a single email, a notification from the bank about a transfer authorization I didn't recognize. My name was listed in the CC field. A mistake, clearly. They must have forgotten to remove me from the old contact list. But that tiny slip cracked open the whole facade. The document showed a quiet movement of funds, large ones, from my parents' estate account to a new one under Daniel's name. It wasn't inheritance. It was siphoning. Piece by piece, they were draining everything long before my father's will would even matter. At first, I thought maybe I was reading it wrong. Maybe it was just business restructuring. But then I saw the signatures, forged. My own digital signature copied and pasted onto approval forms I'd never seen. My mother's handwriting where my father's should have been. That's when I realized it wasn't just betrayal. It was conspiracy. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I wanted to see how deep it went. So, I started digging. Quietly. Nights spent in front of my laptop, reading through contracts I once filed for them, looking for inconsistencies. And what I found was worse than I expected. Offshore accounts, property transfers, and clauses written into new agreements that would render the old will meaningless. They weren't just cutting me out. They were cleaning me out. One night, I opened an old folder marked Estate 2020. Inside were drafts of the original will, the one I had organized. And right there, in bold print, was my designation, executor of the estate, legally binding. Irrevocable unless all parties consented, which of course they hadn't. My father's pride wouldn't have allowed him to go back to the lawyers to undo it. My mother probably assumed it was symbolic, but it wasn't. It meant I had the power to decide which version of the will would stand when the time came. It hit me then, the irony. They thought they were outsmarting me, but all along, I was sitting on the one piece of paper that gave me control of everything they were fighting for. I sat there staring at that line, executor, my name, feeling a strange mix of sadness and satisfaction. I could have stopped it right there, could have called them out, demanded an explanation, even threatened legal action, but I didn't. Because now I wanted to see just how far they'd go when they thought I was powerless. A week later, Daniel called. "Dad's not doing too well," he said casually, like he was talking about the weather. "We might have to start preparing some things." I could hear it in his voice. Not concern, not fear. Anticipation. He wanted the old man gone so the papers could be signed, so the last locks could turn. I remember hanging up and staring out the window for a long time. The city lights blurred, like everything I believed in was fading with them. Then I whispered to myself, "All right, let's play." That's when I started making my own copies. Quiet backups of every forged document, every email chain, every transfer record. I wasn't going to expose them yet. No, I was going to let them finish building their house of lies first. Then, when they finally thought they'd won, I'd pull one brick and watch the whole thing collapse. Time has a cruel way of softening even the hardest people. My father, once the unshakable center of our family, began to fade. It started small, forgetting meetings, losing track of dates, repeating the same questions twice. I could see it in his eyes. The frustration of a man who'd built his life on control, now realizing it was slipping away. My mother tried to hide it. She kept him dressed sharp, his desk organized, the illusion of power still alive. But the cracks were too deep. I'd stop by sometimes, pretending to check in out of duty. Really, I just wanted to see how far the empire had fallen. Every visit, the house felt quieter, emptier, like even the walls were tired of pretending. Daniel, of course, was circling like a vulture. He started taking over my father's calls, sitting in on meetings, introducing himself as the new head of the family. I remember one evening when I dropped by unexpectedly. He was in my father's office, feet on the desk, sipping from my father's whiskey glass. "He's not up to it anymore," Daniel said, smirking. "Someone's got to handle things." I said nothing, just looked at him and smiled, because in that moment, I knew he was doing my work for me. He was exposing himself, his greed, his arrogance, all of it, while I stood quietly in the corner collecting proof. Weeks passed. My father's health declined fast. The man who once commanded every room could barely finish a sentence. My mother grew bitter, paranoid. The perfect mask she'd worn for years was starting to crack. She started snapping at the nurses, checking the locks on the doors twice, and avoiding my calls. Maybe deep down she knew. Maybe some part of her sensed the storm coming. One night she called me in tears. He's not the same anymore, she whispered. He doesn't even remember the will. I told her to rest, that I'd take care of things. And I meant it, just not in the way she imagined. After that, I visited often. I brought groceries, fixed things around the house, made sure they were comfortable. To them it must have looked like forgiveness. But to me, it was the final act of control. Quiet, invisible revenge wrapped in kindness. Daniel hated it. Every time I showed up, he'd glare at me like I was trespassing on his territory. One evening, he cornered me in the kitchen and hissed, "You think you're still part of this family? You're not. They made that clear." I just looked at him and said, "Then why do you sound so afraid?" He didn't answer. He just walked away. By then, I knew the end was near. Not just for my father, but for the lies that held this family together. And I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. Because the thing about time is, it doesn't just break people down, it reveals them. The call came just after midnight. My father was gone. Peacefully, they said. But there's no such thing as peace when a family like ours loses its king. It wasn't grief that followed. It was silence. A heavy waiting silence, like everyone was holding their breath for what came next. The funeral was polite, well-dressed, and utterly hollow. Old friends showed up with fake condolences and practiced tears. My mother stood by the casket like a statue, refusing to break. Daniel worked the crowd, shaking hands, whispering about the transition. I stayed quiet, standing a few feet back, watching it all unfold like I was an outsider at my own life. But the real storm came a week later. The reading of the will. We gathered in my father's study, the same room where he'd once declared I was being cut out. My mother, dressed in black, sat stiff and cold beside Daniel, who looked too eager for someone mourning his father. The lawyer, an old man with half-moon glasses, adjusted his files and cleared his throat. He began reading the will my parents had written. The one they thought would define everything. The house to Daniel, the company shares to Daniel. Even the lake cabin, the one my father and I built together, to Daniel. I sat there listening, expressionless, letting the words bounce off me like rain on glass. When he finished, Daniel leaned back with a smug grin. "Guess that's that," he said, already standing up. But the lawyer didn't move. He shuffled another stack of papers and said, "Actually, there's one more thing." My mother frowned. "What do you mean?" The lawyer looked at me, then back at her. "These are the original documents from the estate," he said. "According to this, your son," he pointed toward me, "is listed as the executor of your husband's will. That means all final authorizations must go through him." The room froze. Daniel's smile vanished. My mother blinked like she hadn't heard right. "That can't be right," she said sharply. "We had that changed." The lawyer adjusted his glasses again. "There's no record of any change. The file remains valid and legally binding. Only the executor has the authority to enforce or disregard revisions." I could feel their eyes on me. Shock, disbelief, anger all swirling together. I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever, and said, "It's okay. I'll handle everything. Fairly." The silence that followed was beautiful. My mother's hands trembled on her lap. Daniel's face turned red with rage. "You knew!" he hissed. "You knew this whole time!" I looked at him and smiled. "I did." He lunged forward, pointing at me. "You can't do this. You wouldn't dare," but I stopped him mid-sentence. "Daniel," I said softly, "I'm not taking anything that isn't mine. I'm just making sure Dad's original wishes are respected. All of them." The lawyer nodded in quiet agreement. The power had shifted, completely and permanently. My mother whispered, "You planned this." I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing. "No," I said. "You did." The rest of the meeting was a blur. Angry voices, legal terms, the sound of paper sliding across the table. But all I remember is that feeling. That cold satisfaction of knowing I hadn't taken revenge. I'd simply let justice do its job. As I left the house that evening, Daniel shouted after me, "You'll regret this!" I didn't even look back. "I already did," I said quietly, and closed the door behind me. The days after the revelation felt unreal, like living in a house where every wall was still vibrating from an explosion. The calls started first. Daniel yelling, threatening, then begging. My mother's voice followed, sharp at first, then cracking, then silent altogether. The family, the friends, the lawyers. Everyone had something to say. Everyone except me. I spent most of my time in my father's old study, going through documents, letters, and records. The desk still smelled faintly of his cologne. I found notes in his handwriting. Reminders, old plans, small details that no one else cared about. And tucked away in the bottom drawer was a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside, a single page. My father's writing again. It said, "If you're reading this, it means things went as I feared. You were always the one who understood what matters. Not the money, not the property, but the truth. Do what's right, even if it costs you everything." For a moment I couldn't breathe. He knew. All along he knew how it would unfold. Outside, the world kept turning. Daniel filed appeals, tried to block my authority. My mother withdrew from everyone, retreating into silence. And me? I didn't fight. I just followed the paperwork. Every form, every account, every clause, done by the book. No emotion, no revenge, just precision. But at night, the house was too quiet. The echoes of what used to be a family hung in the air like ghosts. The laughter, the birthdays, the dinners, all gone, replaced by silence and the hum of an old ceiling fan. One evening, I visited my father's grave. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red, the same colors he used to love during his evening walks. I stood there a long time before saying a word. "I did what you asked," I said quietly. "I did what was right." The wind picked up a little, carrying the faint scent of pine and rain. It felt like an answer, or maybe forgiveness. When I got home, I signed the final transfer documents. The estate was settled. Daniel got his share, smaller than he expected, but fair. My mother kept the house. I kept the memories, and the executor's title, meaningless now that everything was done. But something inside me had changed. For years, I wanted their approval, their love. Now I didn't need it. I'd seen what that kind of love cost, and I wasn't willing to pay it anymore. Sometimes justice doesn't look like victory. It looks like silence, like walking away while the others tear themselves apart, trying to understand how they lost. I closed the file, locked it in the cabinet, and turned off the light. The house fell into darkness. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Just free, you know. People like to think that revenge feels good, that it gives you closure, that sharp satisfaction when the tables finally turn. But standing here now, after all the noise and chaos have faded, I realize it's quieter than I imagined. Not peaceful, just quiet. When I think back on everything, the betrayal, the will, the lies, I see it differently now. My parents didn't just cut me out of their wealth. They cut me out of the illusion that family always means love. And maybe that's the greatest freedom they ever gave me. Funny, isn't it? The thing that was supposed to destroy me ended up setting me free. I used to crave their approval, to prove I belonged in their version of the world. The world of rules, status, appearances. But once you've seen what people will do for control, you stop wanting to be part of it. I don't hate them. Not anymore. Hate is still a kind of attachment, and I'm done carrying it. What I feel now is something colder, and somehow lighter. Detachment, understanding, maybe even pity. Daniel tried reaching out last month, said he wanted to talk things through. I didn't answer. Some conversations don't heal. They just reopen old wounds. I wish him well in the way you wish a storm would pass quickly, but I don't need to stand in the rain anymore. As for the estate, I've decided to sell most of it. The money will go to causes my father would have hated. Scholarships, housing, healthcare, real change. Maybe it's my way of rewriting the story, of making sure something good comes out of the wreckage. You know, people often ask, was it worth it? And I don't have a simple answer, because justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it's quieter. Sometimes it's walking away from everything you once wanted and realizing you don't miss it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Blood might make you related, but truth is what makes you family. And once you understand that, you stop begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for you. So, if you've ever been cut out, betrayed, or left behind, maybe this is your sign. You don't need their permission to start over. You just need the courage to close the door and never look back. And if you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Maybe you saw a piece of yourself in this story. Maybe not. But either way, you know now that sometimes being cut out is just life's way of giving you a clean slate. Now, if you want more stories like this, the kind that dig deep into the darker corners of family and fate, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay tuned, because some truths are better told in whispers. See you in the next one.